I swear I'm gonna get the timing right this time. I didn't use my time right and ran out of time for the first one, and okay, at the noon I'm gonna get it right. Now this time, I better. The third time it should be a charm. How many of you were here or either at this one or the other one last month? So most of you already heard a lot about ISU Extension, so I don't need to repeat all that. Just a reminder that we are a source of unbiased, practical, research-based, non-commercial information. And there's a magnet up here, which many of you would have gotten last time, but it's for one of our most important hotlines. It's a 24/7 hotline that helps people with lots of things that that cause stress. So it's a really valuable resource. We're here today to deal with banking issues, and I am fully aware that in this room, if you're employees of this place, you almost certainly have bank accounts already. So I don't need to do that part of the discussion where we talk about, it really could be worth having a bank account, because sometimes I need to do that. There are something like 10% of American adults don't have bank accounts, so that is a very real issue. I hope to move forward to get to the good stuff first, but I want to have you stop first and think about the last 3 purchases you made and how you made them. Was it cash? How did you make those last 3 purchases? Or maybe if you can think of 3, even go back to 5. What different methods did you use? Debit card, credit card, cash? Badge, all right. And a check, okay. Did anyone do a online purchase? Yeah, of course that would be with a credit card, I guess, technically. So, okay, and if I had asked you that same question 10 or 15 years ago, those of you who are old enough to have been making purchases 10 or 15 years ago, would your answers have been different? Yeah. This is an area that changes a lot. It's always evolving. And these are some things we could talk about, but I think, again, because you guys are pretty well exposed to the range of financial services available, but each method of payment does have pros and cons. And so there are some things to consider there, and we'll be talking about some of those today. And then next month our topic is credit, so we'll deal with credit issues next month. These are the 4 topics. We will spend most of our time, hopefully, on the third area here, types of services offered, hopefully especially focusing on some of the things that are changing with regard to financial services. But I do want to mention a little bit about the 2 core types of mainstream financial services that we deal with. Sadly, I tend to always use the word bank. Your bank might do this, or some banks do this. Banks and credit unions both offer many of the same services, and neither one is better than the other. Banks are commercial businesses. Credit unions are nonprofit, member-owned organizations. So there are some differences. There can be situations where the credit unions have lower fees, but not always, especially the way there's competition in the marketplaces. That isn't really a big deal. One thing that's really changed a lot with credit unions is that a generation ago, nowadays almost anybody can belong to a credit union. A generation ago, you had to work for a certain employer or have some certain affiliation to be part of a credit union. So credit unions have expanded their boundaries, and that's had an impact on the competitive banking or financial services market for everybody. There are some technical differences, terminology differences. Technically, credit unions don't have a checking account. They have a share draft account. Technically, not technically, but there are some things that credit unions can't do, like certain kinds of loans they can't make, and that's all by law. But for the most part, from a consumer perspective, we can do almost anything we want to do at either one of those places. So if I slip and use the phrase bank more than credit union, know that really I'm referring to them interchangeably today. There are some benefits to using a financial institution. And I'm not going to ask you, because this is where I lost some time in the earlier sessions. I asked people to brainstorm some of the benefits of using financial institutions. And instead, I'm just going to throw them up there. Safety is one of the biggest benefits of using a financial institution. What would we do with our paychecks if we didn't have it direct deposited? Would we take it and cash it and carry that cash home and put it in a safe in our basement floor or something? So safety of keeping the bulk of our cash or the bulk of our money, and then also safety in terms of we don't have to carry around a lot of cash as we go about shopping and doing our business, because we have cards or checks that we can use as a placeholder for cash. So safety, convenience. It's much more convenient to be able to make an electronic payment or mail a check than it is to have to carry a wad of cash to the utility company, right? Cost. Does it surprise you to think that cost is an advantage of financial institutions? It won't if you think about it. Here's an example. Somebody who doesn't have a bank account gets paid every week, goes to a place to cash his checks and has to pay a $5 fee every time he cashes a check. So that costs him $260 a year just to get paid. That's the primary way, as well as the idea of having to pay for money orders to pay bills and those kinds of things. That's the primary way in which having a financial institution has cost advantages. It's not without cost, but the costs are less than for people who don't have one. You have easier access to other products in financial industry if you use a financial institution. And then this advantage is also one that we kind of forget about, but it's a whole lot easier to prove you made a payment if you made it through a financial institution, if you have a canceled check or if you have a record that you made that payment. Otherwise, we'd all have to be extra vigilant about holding on to every little receipt. And this way we can be sloppy about that and still get by with it if we want to. Okay, when you're looking for a financial institution, how many of you have switched or opened an account at a new financial institution sometime in the last 5 or 10 years? Lots of you, okay. So you've had, in your memory, you can be thinking about what were the things you were looking for when you chose that financial institution. Tell me what some of those were. Location. Convenience, meaning location, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Interest rates.
Interest rates for loans or for the interest paid to you on deposits, or both?
Well, both, but mostly the paid.
Okay. My most recent experience choosing a bank had to do with the interest rate for a mortgage. So it was the other way around. Go on. Other reasons. Fees. Okay. And you paid attention to what the fees were. Anything else that caused you to choose one bank over another? Anybody? Service. Did you have a way of evaluating that? Oh, you went in and asked some questions, and how nice were they to you? How helpful were they? Great. That's wonderful. Well, most of you all have made these decisions and would not find it intimidating to have to make those decisions again if you move to a new town, say. But this handout is a check sheet, some of the things to think about. And it's got, 2 columns, so you could compare 2 different institutions, or you could add more columns and compare 4 or 6 if you wanted to. It's 2 sides, which you might or might not have noticed. So there are a lot of factors to consider. Most of them, like the broad term fees, covers a lot of them. We talked about location, but then also branch locations, or what kind of an ATM network does it have? Does it have a network of ATMs so that I could use an ATM for free in some of the places where I travel to? That's a factor that 30 years ago we might not have thought about in choosing a bank, but now we do. So there's a variety of things to think about. Any surprises that you see as you look over that list?
Not a surprise, but I forgot about making sure that they're federally insured.
Right, federally insured. You've got to be sure of that, and we sort of assume they are, But yes, you want to be positive that they are. And with a bank, that would be FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. With a credit union, it's CUNA, Credit Union National Association, I think. Or administration, maybe. CUNA, I know that. All right, so everybody's going to choose different banks for different reasons, but it's valuable to give some thought to why you're choosing something and not just choose it because your neighbor works there. Which, that could be a plus, but it's not the only factor to consider. All right, so onward. At an institution, you may have access to any or all of these sources. Your little bingo sheet. This is the first day I've ever actually used this bingo sheet. But the bingo sheet has all the definitions. On the screen are all the words. So, oh, you didn't get one?
That's fine.
Here. Wait, that's the one with the answers on it. We can't be giving you that one.
You might not have known.
Good. So take a minute and just make sure you can match them up. It's not like anybody's going to care if you write them down, so you can write them or not. But take a minute and see if all those services are things you're familiar with. This seems tedious to do it this way, but it's less tedious than having me go through them all. Just say, this is what this is. Oh, I know. Yeah. I should have had this row do the first row, and this row do the second row, and this row do the third row. That would have been clever. Any questions about any of them? Anything unfamiliar? Maybe just for the sake of the tape, we'll tell people what the answers are. Starting looking at the first column and then going down, giving permission to your bank to pay your regular bills automatically, that would be pre-authorized payment. Going down, the next one, what would that be? Maybe you didn't get there yet. Electronic funds transfer. And that can be a big deal, but it also can be a pretty small thing that we can do. It also is something huge that banks do. Wire transfer is the bottom one on the left, a form of money transfer from one bank to another. Sometimes we do that not through a bank, but through another kind of company as well. Middle column, top is savings account. Somebody pointed out that checking accounts earn interest too, but they don't have to. By definition, savings accounts do earn interest. Not much these days, but a little. Whereas checking accounts, that's a choice that banks make. They might pay you interest or they might not. So the middle one is direct deposit. Employers give employees this option to receive their salaries electronically. And nowadays, not all employers give people the option. Many employers, it's a requirement. The bottom center, automated teller machines. It's nice to be reminded what that ATM phrase stands for. We get used to just talking about ATMs, but that's an automated teller. How do you suppose bank tellers felt when those first came out? You know? Whoa, just a machine to do my job. Weird. But it's a very useful thing, because don't some of you remember, many of you probably remember, what it used to be like on Friday before the bank closed. I got to figure out what I'm doing this weekend and how much cash I might need, because that's my last chance to get money out of my bank account, right? Lots of people nodding their heads. And that's such a strange thing. My children have no concept of that. And some of you who are younger have no concept of that. In my memory, my first exposure to ATMs was in the mid to late 80s, like 1985, 1987. I was well out of college by then. So for some of you who are younger, just think of being a college student and not having access to cash. Top right, safe deposit box. The the middle right is a money order, and the bottom right is a checking account. I'm guessing that there's probably no one in the room who has used all 9 of these services in the last year or two. I say that because money orders and checks are not necessarily, but usually mutually exclusive. If you have a checking account, you're not going to be using money orders, and vice versa. And money orders are one service that typically is not provided through a bank or credit union, but is provided through some other organization. Anyway, that's just a little definitional recreation, fun. To open an account, these are some of the things you need: an ID, a social security number, or what's called an ITIN, an individual tax ID number. That's for people who are not here in a status that allows them to have a social security number, or for foreigners like Canadian or European citizens who want to have a US bank account. They just need to get a tax ID number. You need a certain amount of money to open an account, and you need to think about the signature card and how you sign your name, and recognize that you should sign it in a way that you will continue to sign it. But that's all the easy stuff. This is also pretty easy. But again, for some of those folks where banking is something they're not sure they want, or they're not sure they can do, maybe they've had bad experiences with bank accounts in the past. They've had a lot of overdrafts, paid a lot of fees, and they just swore off bank accounts, never going to do that again. Well, if they want to consider easing their way back into banking, a savings account is the sort of the safest way to start, because you have very little chance of messing up or incurring a lot of fees with a savings account. You can open it with quite a small amount of money. It provides access to the bank so that even if you have a paycheck you don't want to deposit, the bank recognizes you as a customer, so you can cash a check and you don't have to pay fees. But the big thing is that you are not at risk of overdrawing your account. It can almost never happen with a savings account, so that's a big plus. The one thing about a savings account is you can't be taking, and this is federal regulations, you can't be taking money out of your savings account every day, all month long. There's a limit, I think it's 6. There's a limit of 6 withdrawals each month if it's a savings account. So that is something for people just to be aware of. It's not necessarily a disadvantage, it's just a planning point, that's all. Okay? And then checking accounts. How many of you have a checking account? I'm guessing everybody? Okay. Why do you have a checking account? What are the advantages or the reasons or the benefits? Some things have to be paid by check.
Pay bills.
To pay bills, even if you're not paying by check. It's still the way to pay bills. You couldn't pay all your bills with a savings account, could you?
We use our debit card through our checking, I guess.
Okay, it allows you a debit card, yep. Other benefits of having a checking account? What about drawbacks to checking accounts?
Overdraft.
Fees and overdrafts. The fact is that checking accounts require some management to avoid problems. That's why for someone who's not sure of their skill or their commitment to working at financial management, a savings account is the safe way to start, because you can't really screw up there. But with a checking account, you have to manage it or you can screw up, and that's the key thing. I want to check my notes and see if there's any key advantages of, I think we hit the main advantages of checking accounts. Managing an account, a checking account. How many of you know somebody, most likely a younger person, although not necessarily, who just doesn't bother keeping a check register anymore? And it could be you. Those of you who do keep a check register, those of you who do keep a check register, whether you keep it really type A wise or whether you keep it a little more loosely, maybe not every day, maybe not all the time, but you catch it up. What would you say to those people who don't keep a check register?
How do you know how much money they have?
Yeah, okay. Everybody, we had the same answer from many people. How do you know how much money you have? The answer they'll give you is, I check online. What would you say to them?
Everything's correct. It's always clear.
Not everything is current online, and that's just a huge piece of understanding how banks work that sometimes young people haven't got figured out, and usually it's young people. It's not always really young people, because I've had some sort of pretty middle-aged people say, well, I know it was okay when I wrote that check. I don't understand why I got an overdraft fee, because I called that morning and they said I had $380 in the account, so I know I could write that $200 check. Because she didn't understand, and she was not a young person. If I write a check to you, and because maybe, what did he sell me? He didn't sell me Tupperware, I'll bet, but whatever.
Probably did some maintenance.
Maybe he sold me some tickets to a Cyclones game or something. Yeah, and so I wrote him a check, and he put it in his pocket and didn't get to the bank for maybe a week. And then he takes it to his bank a week from now, and his bank processes it, and then they have to process it and get it to my bank. So it could be 9-10 days before it comes back through and is shown on my bank statement. Now, if those were Cyclone tickets, that was probably a $200 check, maybe, depending which sport, probably. But if that was a $200 check, and if I'd been checking my account saying, oh, look, I've got plenty of money, I can go shopping, I can do whatever I want to do. Well, I'm not up to date. Things don't clear. And that's what people need to understand. And that's what many of you in chorus were ready to say. So it is possible to make an argument that people who never, ever, ever write a check can get by without keeping a check register, because mostly debit transactions get posted very quickly. Not always the same day, though. In my experience, at least, the smaller stores, they don't always have a direct line where it gets piped right through. When I buy groceries at Fairway, I get home, it's cleared, you know? But if I go to my pharmacy, which is a small pharmacy, and use my debit card, that has not cleared till a day or two later, usually. So even with debit card or electronic transactions, it might not be immediately there. But a person who never uses checks might get by with it, but even there it's risky, because they might forget that they scheduled to pay their credit card bill on the 31st, and they might not have that recorded in their mind, and of course it doesn't show up in their checkbook statement yet either. So it's risky not to. I also just want to show you this because I forgot to show the second group. Debit cards we're going to talk about in a minute, or ATM cards. A couple years ago, we got a modest supply of these little booklets. It's a checkbook register, just the size for a debit card. And this is my last one. So I'm not giving it away, but I'm showing it to people. If you ever have a shot at getting a hold of one of these, and maybe it wouldn't matter to you, but for some people who really use their debit card and that's all, this could be wonderful. It's easy to carry around with them. It's got a little pocket to slip the debit card in the back. So that's something to be aware of if you find that you have access to them somewhere. All right, one of the things, yes ma'am?
Do you have no idea on where you have access to that?
No, I should perhaps do some research on that.
Like the banks?
Some banks might.
Bank used to have them, but
You could ask.
I got the last one in downtown French a couple months ago.
She got the last one.
And you have to look for it.
Okay, so they don't have, at least as of a couple months ago, they didn't have any more. You could ask your bank, and if enough people ask, maybe they'll say, oh, we should invest in some of those. It's always possible. Otherwise, I don't know. Like I said, these were provided by a special guest we had from the Federal Reserve, so that was a treat. How many of you love electronic banking? Okay. Love is a strong word, but you like electronic banking at least. Yes, okay, that's better. What do you do electronically? Pay bills,
Check balance.
check your balance, make purchases, make transfers. Wonderful, great examples. And it's so much easier to be able to do that even once we had ATM machines, and I could make a transfer from savings to checking at an ATM machine, which was sort of more convenient than having to go to the bank or call. Still, it's really slick to do it from home at midnight, so I don't forget, you know. You can deposit electronically. Say a little more. You take a picture? Okay. Right. And that's going to vary by bank, and there are, but yes, that capacity is out there to take a picture of a check, send it to your bank, and they will consider that deposited. Isn't that something?
Do you destroy the check?
I don't think so. I don't think you have to. You probably would want to.
I've seen my daughter do it because it's instantly deposited.
Mm-hmm.
She throws hers away. Once it shows up.
You'd want to shred it, yeah.
Once it shows up online, she puts it in the shredder.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the newest things that's available, and that's great that you mentioned it. And we're going to have time to get to that at this session too, so that's good. Electronic features, I've got some up here. You pretty much mentioned them all. Direct deposit, we take for granted. You didn't even mention it, partly because it's not something that you do. It's something your employer does. Transferring, making loan payments or other payments, not just loans, but other bills. And then the automatic bill payment that you might have pre-scheduled. That was available, at least to me, and I'm sure for all of you, that was available first. Before we could go on our bank accounts and say, I want to pay my phone bill, and I'm going to pay it on this date. Prior to that, we could set up a deal with our phone company or our utility company or whatever, that on the 5th of the month, your utility bill will always just be transferred out. So I still have a couple of those automatic bill payments just because they're left over from before I had electronic banking. Personally, I wouldn't do that anymore. I would now always keep control of it, but I only have a couple of them, so it's fine. Going backwards now to ATM machines, they were the first of the real modern technology. Just a quick review. At an ATM machine, you can do deposits, check balances, do transfers, and certainly, of course, do withdrawals. You can also use ATM machines for credit card withdrawals, for cash advances on your credit card. Definitely do not recommend that. Extremely costly. You're probably fully aware of that. We'll talk about credit next month, but that's a really costly way to borrow money. So not recommended by anybody. Questions to ask when you're getting a bank account or a new bank account. You want to make sure you understand their ATM policies, and mostly that has to do with fees. If you've come from a certain bank and you've been there a long time, you might take for granted that all banks are the same as your old bank was, and don't. I mean, you want to make sure you really understand all their fees. So ask some questions, or even just start with a question that says, well, tell me what I need to know about using ATM machines with this card. Just let them tell you, but then follow up with more questions. Because some banks have a fee for simply having a card, a monthly or annual fee simply for having an ATM card. Some banks have a per transaction fee for all transactions. Most banks around here don't have a per transaction fee for all transactions, only if you're using a machine that's outside of that bank or its network. So, but again, what counts as out of network and that kind of thing matters. Asking the question, how can I avoid fees, is a good question to ask too when you're, again, with a new bank, not taking things for granted. Selecting a PIN. How many of you, thinking of your bank account, how many of you got to select your own PIN? Wow. I found that at the first session this morning too. My PIN was just given to me. And recently they just changed it, so I have a new PIN, and sometimes I still punch in the old one. There are some risks with selecting your own PIN. And the having it randomly given to you has some advantages. I wasn't happy about it. I had to figure out a way to remember it. But I realized that from a security standpoint, it's an advantage because I didn't pick it. And so no one who knows me would be likely to guess it. And that's the thing. If you picked your own PIN, maybe you'd pick the last 4 digits of your phone number, or maybe you'd pick your house number, or maybe you'd pick some combination of your children's birthdays. Maybe you'd pick some number that has some meaning to you, the year you graduated from high school. You know, it could be anything. Don't do that, because that's something someone else could guess. So if you have the opportunity to select your own PIN, try really hard to choose something that maybe it has meaning to you, but no one would guess it, you know. Or really try hard to be random. Just flip a dice, roll a dice. Okay, the first number that comes up is 4. Okay, roll a dice. Second number, of course, you still only get 1 through 6 then. You won't get any 9s, but do be cautious about selecting a PIN, and then of course be cautious about disclosing that PIN to anyone. Avoid it, really. Even people you trust, they could inadvertently tell somebody else, you know. So it's really risky to tell anyone your PIN, and definitely don't write it on your card. Some people do that, used to do that. I think hardly anybody does that anymore. But don't really even carry it with you in your billfold. Keep receipts, how to avoid fees. Seems like I wanted to mention something there, but I'm not sure what it was. Oh, if you find yourself in a position where you say you've traveled a distance and you do need more cash, and you didn't want to bring all the cash, so you want to pull out some cash periodically, and you have no choice but to use foreign ATM. In other words, you're going to pay those fees. Remember that the fees you pay are per transaction. So if I withdraw $20 now and then I say this afternoon, oh, I need $20 more. And then tonight I go out for supper, I say, oh, I need $20 more. So 3 transactions in one day at $2 a transaction maybe, that's spending way more money than I need to. So if you find yourself in a position, this is just common sense, if you find yourself in a position where you have to pay those transaction fees, do as few as possible. Make a few big withdrawals. Okay. Debit cards. We sort of think of debit cards and ATM cards as the same. And for a lot of us nowadays, they are. Okay? It's the same card. But a debit card is technically different. For one thing, with a debit card, or when you're using your card as a debit card, you can only work with your checking account. An ATM card can apply to both a savings and a checking account. But a debit card can only be used on your checking account. And it's designed to be used for transactions, not just at that ATM machine. It's designed to be used for transactions, in other words, at stores. Most cards have the option of doing transactions either with a PIN or with a signature. There may be some, and again, this is something to not take for granted when you're talking to a new bank, if you ever are getting a new bank. Don't take for granted that their card has both options. Make sure, if that's what you want, make sure it does have both options, or make sure you understand which one they have. But a PIN-based card means that when you swipe it, then you punch in the 4 numbers of your PIN, and then you don't never have to sign anything. With a signature-based transaction, they swipe it and they print out a sheet of paper or put it on an electronic screen and you sign it, just like a credit card transaction. So it's just important to understand the difference. One thing to keep in mind, not all stores are equipped to deal with PINs. So if you have a card that only has PIN capacity, then there might be certain stores you wouldn't be able to use it at, because they don't have a little punch pad for you to punch your PIN in. PIN-based transactions almost always clear very fast. Signature-based transactions usually will take a little longer. So that's something else to keep in mind, that those are the ones that are most likely to not show up for a day or two later. Not ages, but a day or two. This morning I learned something new in the first group. Somebody said, well, one thing that she was told when she got her debit card at her new bank was that she's only allowed 10 PIN transactions a month. And if she has more than 10 PIN transactions, then it's going to be, I don't know if it's $1.95 per use after that, or just $1.95 fee. But anyway, there would be fees. after 10 transactions. So when she has a choice, she always uses the signature so that she can save those PIN transactions for when she might really need them. And the person sitting down the table from her said, well, that's really weird because my bank has a limit, I'm not sure if it was 10, but we'll just say, has a limit of 10 signature transactions. And so whenever I have the option, I always use my PIN because they only will let me use so many signature transactions. Interesting thing that I hadn't experienced personally and nor had I heard about, and just something to be aware of. And if you know that, you can be smart about how you use it and you'll probably be fine and probably never pay any fees. So something new. Safety tips. I guess mainly I'll just talk about the lost or stolen card thing. Always, of course, if any card is lost or stolen, you want to report it as quickly as you can. If, with a debit card, if you report it before it has been used, if you report it that you lost it, like you realize right away, oh my gosh, I left it there, then you won't end up with any liability for someone else trying to use it. You know, maybe they found it and tried to spend some money with it. If you report it before it's been used, zero liability because they can close it or they can cancel it. If you report it in a prompt fashion, but it's already been used, generally your maximum liability will be $50. And some banks will even absorb that for you. But generally, the most it will cost you will be $50 for whatever that other person spent money on. But a debit card is something to guard well, because again, the money's coming right out of your bank account. So it's worse to lose a debit card than it is to lose a credit card, because if someone uses your credit card, you'll get a bill, and you'll be able to say, wait a minute, that's not right. If someone uses your debit card, they're getting the money out of your account immediately, so you don't have that leeway of time. And with that in mind, we might have talked about this last time, I'm not sure. But with that in mind, we always recommend that people use credit cards anytime they're making an internet or mail order purchase. Never use debit cards for those, because if there was either a mistake or a fraudulent use of your information, that money would already be gone out of your bank account. And you might get it back, but if you did, it would be a big hassle. In the meantime, you've got checks bouncing. So for distance transactions, credit cards are a better choice. And then another time when it's not smart to use a debit card, I had a lady this noon say, I've never had a debit card, and now I just decided I never want one. And she was an older lady, and that's fine, it's her choice. I'm not saying these cautions about debit cards to tell you not to use them, because they're very useful and very convenient. And a lot of people use them in order to prevent building up debt. If they want the convenience of plastic, but they don't want to build up debt so that, oh my gosh, what if I can't pay the bill at the end of the month? Then a debit card is absolutely the way to go. So I'm not saying that, but there are these two situations where debit cards are not a wise choice. And the second one has to do with a situation where they would put a block on your account. And that's familiar, some of you are nodding. Hotel room was the first example we became aware of. If I make a hotel reservation and I'm going to stay for 2 nights and it's $100 a night, they might or might not do this when I make the reservation. They might only do it when I check in. But if I'm going to stay for 2 nights, they're going to take my card and they're going to block $300 or $400. Not just the 2 nights, not just the $200 that I'm planning to spend, but extra, because you never know if I might do room service or whatever. They're going to put that block charge on my account, because they want to make sure that when I check out, I'm not over my credit limit, or I'm not overdrawn in my checking account. Well, if they do that on my credit card, that's not a big deal. If they do that on my checking account, that could be a big deal, because I might end up with checks bouncing because they put a $400 block and I might have not had the extra $200 available for that. The same thing is true for rental cards and gas stations, more and more as well. With gas stations, it's usually a $75 charge now. Used to be $50. Now it's usually $75. Down the road, that could change again. But when I swipe my card, they don't know how much gas I'm going to buy. So they'll put a hold of $75 on my account. And then I finish pumping my gas, and it was $38. And so then they'll charge the $38. And within the next 12 to 24 hours, that $75 charge will be erased, taken off. But in the meantime, if I was running my checking account real tight, that could be tricky. If you always have plenty of leeway in your checking account, no problem using your debit card at a gas station. If you want to pay with plastic and don't want to take that risk, but if you want to use debit, then all you have to do is wait till you're done pumping and go inside and pay, or prepay inside. Because if you go inside and pay, they know exactly how much, so they don't need to put that block on. Okay. Mobile banking. This is the newest realm in the evolution of financial services. And this is the part that I didn't get to for the other people. And we've been so speedy. We're doing a great job. But I forgot to tell you this. I'm in such a hurry. Back to debit cards. Big issue with debit cards from a perspective of managing your bank account well is making sure you remember what transactions you did, that you get them recorded in your register. Often that's an issue with couples because one partner in the couple is the one who's conscientious and pays attention to the bank accounts, and the other one may use the card and never tell the one. Or in some couples, both parties are pretty good, but everybody's fallible. In other couples, neither party's very good. It could be anyway, and singles benefit from these too. This is just a tool you can help yourself when we're done today if you want. It's a little envelope to put a debit card or a credit card in, and then it's got some space to write. So you can write, okay, I took $40 out at the cash machine on March 27th. And then, whatever else I do. Then what that means with a debit card is that I can remember to get those things recorded in my checkbook. With a credit card, it means I won't be surprised at the end of the month when the bill comes. And that's a plus too. You can help yourself to these. I am getting down to the last of my supply. We've had these for a long time, and now I'm finally running out. So I do want to show you. You can make your own. Just take a little envelope, the small kind, like this, seal it shut. Take your credit card and put it across the bottom like this. It's just the right size. And cut right around by the credit card. Don't leave a lot of leeway because then you'll have trouble fishing your card out. And then you can do it at the other end too. So from one envelope, you can get 2 credit card holders and lots of white space as well. More white space than on here. So do take these, but I want you also to know that when you run out, you can make your own if you find them useful. So, all right, now to mobile banking. Mobile banking relies on a mobile device of any kind. What would be a mobile device? Examples. Your phone is the first one that comes to mind. What else? Tablet, iPad, whatever. Yeah. Somebody else's phone.
They have those little attachments and you put it right on your phone.
Okay, cool. I forgot about that. Yep, that's, again, pretty new. You need some kind of mobile device. Usually it's a phone or a tablet. Sometimes it also could be a PDA. Certain personal digital assistants would have that capacity, although those are not very common anymore. You also need to have data access in some way. Usually that means a data plan with your phone or with your tablet. There are 3 different kinds of mobile transactions, and one of them is a little more low-tech than you might think. Some of you may have used it without considering that it was a mobile banking transaction, and that is the texting. When there's a natural disaster somewhere and it says text these 5 numbers to Red Cross, or text Red Cross to these 5 numbers, or whatever it is, then you can donate $10 to the Red Cross. Well, that is mobile banking. That's making a purchase using your mobile device. So that is an example. And usually what happens with those is that you'll then be charged that on your cell phone bill. But also you may have prearranged for those kind of charges to be paid by to be put on a certain credit card, or to be put through a PayPal account or something like that. So that's also possible. But even those texting things count as mobile banking. So you don't even need a smartphone to do mobile banking necessarily. The second type is internet-based. And with an internet-based transaction, or any kind of internet-based electronic banking, what you do is you take your little device, and let's just say a phone, because with a tablet it wouldn't be so hard, but with a phone it's pretty hard. How many of you ever go to the internet on your phone? Yeah, and it's pretty hard, right? Unless you know the mobile-friendly site of the internet, of the website. Because the screen gets really small, it's really hard to read, and to think about having to type your password in, and type your username in, and then your password in, and all that, and it's very, very slow to load whole regular internet sites onto a phone. So it can be done. It works, and you don't need any special technology as long as you have the capacity to get internet access. So it'd be just like doing it at home from your computer, but you can do it from your phone. However, because that's really cumbersome, because phones aren't equipped to handle all the data that's there in websites, there are applications you can buy. So that's the third kind, app-based. You can get, and you might even be able to get them without buying them in some cases. You can get an app that makes it easier for your phone to talk to your bank account. And so then it's the data, all that data from the bank's website is distilled out, so you only have to get the critical stuff, so it's not so slow or so cumbersome. So those are ways. Does anybody do that? Does anyone use a cell phone app or a tablet app to do banking? Okay, not yet. In an earlier group, we did have someone who used it all the time, found it really, really helpful. I'm going to come back to mobile payments, but I want to talk about protections with mobile banking. Lots of people in the room use electronic banking, presumably from your computer at home or from your computer. Does it feel safer or riskier to have that stuff, to do that stuff on your phone versus your computer? Or does it seem like about the same? The thing with the phone or a tablet is that it's more likely that could get lost or stolen. You lose your phone, and if it's got your bank information in it and all that stuff too, then that's pretty scary. You're not so likely to lose your home computer. If it's a laptop, you could, but even so, you're not hauling it all over town. So you want to have protections in place for your device. Number one, you want to be careful with it, not leave it casually around. Number two, your device, whether it's an iPad or a phone, needs to be password protected. If you're doing anything secure on your device, you should have a password protection so that nobody can even get into your phone without plugging in some kind of password. And number three, in terms of device protection, would be, if possible, to get the capacity to wipe your phone clean from a distance, remotely, if it was lost or stolen. I've seen that on TV shows, cop shows. I mean, that's all I've seen. That's where I've seen it. But you can do that probably through your cell company, or maybe it has to do with the make of phone you have too. But from a distance, if your phone was lost, you could just wipe it clean, and then no one would get access to any of your stuff or your pictures or anything else. Another protection aspect to consider is what network you're using. Today I was, between sessions, I was working on Mary Greeley's public internet network, and I was perfectly happy doing that. I was doing email. There's nothing incredibly confidential or that needs a lot of security, but that's not secure. If I was using an iPad or a tablet and sitting in your waiting room as a member of the public, and would I want to do banking there? it would be risky to do banking using a public Wi-Fi. So you want to think very hard before you do any banking transactions in a situation where you're relying on a public, non-secure Wi-Fi network. If you can use your actual cell plan, your actual phone plan, then that's going to work better for you. What I've read so far says that problems with malware, viruses, and those kinds of things infecting phones and portable tablets those problems have not been huge. There's been maybe a small amount of it, but it has not erupted as a major issue. But that is something we want to think about too with our phones and any portable devices, just like we do with our computers. Do we have up-to-date virus protection and firewalls and those kinds of things? I'm way far from being a computer expert, but it's something we all want to be thinking about if we're going to be doing that. And then the final thing is a cost protection. Just be aware that if you have a limit on how much data you can use on your plan, you might use a whole lot of data doing banking, so you want to make sure you're aware of that so that you don't end up with a huge cell phone bill at the end of the month. Strong passwords, of course, monitoring your accounts to see if anything untoward has happened. Mobile payments is the newest thing of all. And in the thing you talked about where your daughter took a picture of her check and that was enough to deposit it, that was a combination of, I think, mobile payments and an app-based banking. But that is much the new frontier. There are, of course, the text thing, that's a mobile payment that's been around for a while and that doesn't seem quite so foreign to people. But there are situations where you can actually arrange for an account, and it could be sort of similar to a PayPal account, or it could be through your cell phone plan where you arrange with to have a credit card billed for things that you buy. But the day is coming when we may be able to, if we want, hold our cell phone up to a little terminal at the checkout counter at a store and just have it transfer the money that way. I have not much experience or knowledge on that, but it's something to be aware of. And to think about make sure you understand it before you use it. I guess that's the bottom line with all this, is make sure you understand it before you use it. Comments about mobile banking first? Okay, I've got just a couple things left. Overdrafts we've referred to already. And of course with mobile banking you can overdraft just as much as you can with checks and debit cards and everything else. I just want to say a couple things about overdrafts. The traditional overdraft protection that most banks offer is if I write a check and I didn't have enough money in my account and the bank chooses to cover it, they might cover it and then charge me $30. They also might send it back to the store and still charge me $30, and then the store would charge me $30 too. So that would be an overdraft charge without overdraft protection. But the traditional protection would be that they would cover the check and then charge me the fee. Some banks have a slightly better deal where the fee isn't going to be quite as bad. They may have a plan that you can set up, or they may have it as their standard plan, where if you do an overdraft, they'll cover it and they'll transfer the money from your savings, or and they'll charge you a fee, but a smaller fee for that. Or they may have a line of credit that they'll set up for you, and if you do that, if you have an overdraft, then they'll just turn it into a loan for you. And if that's if that's what they're offering you, you want to make sure you understand it. Having some overdraft protection is smart. I mean, anybody can make a mistake. So having some overdraft protection is smart. However, relying on it a lot is not smart. So one thing that's changed just in the last 2 or 3 years, it was part of the Dodd-Frank legislation. The new regulation says that a bank can still decide to automatically cover the checks that you any checks that you might be bouncing. They can automatically cover those, and they can automatically cover any electronic payments you've made through your account, but they can no longer automatically cover you if you make a debit card purchase that overdraws your account, or if you make an ATM withdrawal that overdraws your account. The Federal Reserve set these regulations, and they did a bunch of research with consumers, and consumers said, we want you to cover our checks. If we accidentally overdrew our account and we paid our utility bill, we want you to cover our checks. But if I'm swiping my card to buy McDonald's and I didn't realize I was in a situation that would create overdraft, I do not want you to let me do that. I want you to flash up a big denied mark so that I don't spend that money then. So the rule now is that unless you opt in, unless you tell them you want them to cover your overdrafts with debit or ATM transactions, they can't. And that saves you from making those overdrafts because they can turn it down right at the moment. So, and that's a useful law for consumers. Finally, just a little about prepaid cards. Primarily, this relates to all those folks who don't have bank accounts, but other people also have use for prepaid cards on occasion. They can be called prepaid debit or prepaid credit cards, but the truth is, they're always debit cards. They're never credit cards. It's never a loan. A prepaid card, by definition, is you put the money in. If I'm loaded $200 on this card, when it's gone, it's gone. Nobody's giving me any loans. Okay, so it's always really a debit card. The critical thing about prepaid cards is that you need to understand the fees. And if you decide you want a prepaid card for some purpose, somebody used a great example at one of the other sessions. They said their daughter was going on a trip, like a school trip. They did not want her to have a debit card where she could spend all the money in her account. Instead, they sent her with a prepaid card. And that way she had some limits, but she had the convenience of plastic and the fact that she would have to, I think, enter a PIN in order to use it. So it was a little more security than just carrying cash. So anybody might be in a position of, for one reason or another, wanting to get some debit cards, prepaid cards. Sometimes there's a fee just to have the card. Sometimes there's a fee to load money on. Sometimes there's a fee at an ATM. Sometimes there's a fee to call and ask questions about what the balance is. And sometimes there's no fee if you do that online. So the fees are complex, and you really want to make sure you understand them. Non-usage fees, if you have it for 3 months and don't use it, then they can start, I don't know about 3 months, but for a certain length of time and haven't used it, they can start applying a fee to it. They do sometimes have the capacity to pay some bills online, so that can be a benefit. People who like prepaid cards, one of the things they like about it is, again, they're not going into debt. They can't spend more than what's on it, just like the mom who sent her daughter with that much money. One of the things people don't realize is that they're not helping to build up their credit history with a prepaid card. Even if you use it very wisely and responsibly, it's not improving your credit score. Lost or stolen card can be a real problem, more than with debit cards or credit cards, and absolutely no protection if the company goes out of business. The overdraft, there are some prepaid cards that will say, we have overdraft protection, so you can be covered. That means that actually goes against the whole purpose of prepaid cards, which is to limit your spending. And so it's probably counterproductive for most people, but in addition, it's super expensive. It's as expensive as a payday loan, which we'll talk about next month. But it is really expensive. And then this last little note was something I hadn't realized until recently. When you have an account, a card, and if it's a refillable card especially, when you're done using it, you might just cut up the card and throw it away. But if it's actually a card that you've reloaded periodically, it's important for you to close the account. Otherwise, it shows up as something on just in your history, and it could create problems for you in the future. All right, so bottom line, this is the first time today we've gotten to the ending slide. Isn't that great? Bottom line, this is a world that changes all the time. So we always need to stay informed, read, pay attention, always compare what your options are, and always understand the terms of the contract, the fees, the risks, the benefits before you use something new. And security is more important than ever. Security is, online banking is secure, it's great, but you just need to make sure you're using all the proper security measures. All right, I think we need to go. It's 4:32. Have a good evening. And help yourself to these if you want them.